Wow. Piers Morgan had a concrete, somewhat coherent response to Jordan Peterson. The moment. Okay, I am awake. Let's continue. This is kind of old. This is like 9 months old, but I never saw it. He went on Piers Morgan's show to debate or not debate, but talk about the psychology of Vladimir Putin with Piers Morgan. I don't know why. He's not like a Ukraine expert. They should probably be asking him more about like what could his expertise is like your bedroom. Like that's the type of advice he offered that was helpful, that it was actually based in his work. I don't know why he's dipping his toes so deeply in the geopolitics. Because I watched his original video on the war and it was not good. And I have a weird feeling that this video will not be much of it, but we'll watch it anyway.
Well, he's a lot more like everybody else than anyone thinks. You know, the notion that he's Hitler or Stalin, that's just foolish. I don't see any evidence for that at all. I mean, first of all, Hitler and Stalin were very singular types, and there's a bit of Hitler and Stalin in everyone, so, you know, there's some truth in that. Maybe there's more in the typical Russian leader.
A bit of Hitler in everyone? Really?
There's more than a bit.
Really?
Okay, I'd not, okay.
Really? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, well, why would have Nazism spread the way it did?
You know what would be funny? If everyone hates the Jews a little bit, right, guys? And he looks around, Jordan Peterson. Little bit, right? 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 We all what? Right? A little. What? Like he's just projecting. He's just projecting his own like, personal beliefs that he assumes everyone else is just a little anti-Semitic.
You know, people think, well, that's all top down. It's not top down. There's a part of people that are all these people who informed on Kate Berbalsing.
Well, didn't Goebbels say that the way to get vast numbers of people to go along with what you want to do is to terrify them?
Yeah, well, you could
hold
do that.
a grip of terror over them.
Oh, yeah, but...
And then, in a way, that's what Putin's now doing with the Russian people, where he's going back now into a position of they're all trying to get us, they want to attack us, they want to take us over. He's terrifying his people to rally support for what at the moment is a conflict he has started, which is not going the way he assumed.
Well, the most, what would you say, the wisest commentators on totalitarian states, like Solzhenitsyn, and many psychological commentators, Jung was a good example of that, made a very straightforward case that you can't have a...
I'm sorry, are we really going to just brush over the fact that Jordan Peterson said there's a little Hitler in everyone, more than a little, actually? He's just not going to expand on that? Piers isn't going to follow up on that? Okay, whatever. Hey, Gappy, hope you're doing well.
Totalitarian state, unless every single person is willing to lie about everything all the time. And you can think about that as top down because the leaders lie too. And they also enforce punishments if you don't lie. But then you can also think about it. The totalitarian spirit is replicated at every level of the society. And so in a truly totalitarian state, husbands lie to their wives and parents lie to their children. And the totalitarian state is actually the grip of the lie. And so... And people will certainly go along with that. I mean we're seeing that emerge here with cancel culture. It's like, lie,
yes,
or else.
Yes.
It's like, yeah, well.
And the Russian people...
What? What is that even? We're seeing totalitarianism is more of a personal interactions, like how you allow lies to grip you in your everyday life. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't know if it's actually how I would describe it, but I'm not an expert on that. Doesn't sound too far off to be like that. Have no value in being, okay? And that is just like cancel culture. What does that mean? That's what? Can it not be that somebody gets canceled for like a bad reason, but it's still like if somebody gets canceled for something stupid, like let's say somebody like said a slightly off color joke and that got canceled. That's not a lie. That's somebody being oversensitive. Let's say somebody got canceled for something stupid. Again, not a lie, oversensitive. I don't know what he means by like lies. Like cancel culture is all about lies. And that therefore it's like our totalitarian culture that we've started to impose on ourselves.
We'll be bombarded all the time with state media propaganda, and we'll be buying into a lot of what Putin is saying.
Yeah.
How does this war end, do you think?
We're going to find out this winter. Well, I know what I would do in his shoes.
We didn't find out this winter. Wait, was his... Okay, I don't know what he meant by that. We're gonna find out this winter. We didn't... The Russians kept attacking during the winter. They didn't really get anything. They didn't really achieve anything, except really a lot of casualties. I don't know what he means here. We're gonna find out this winter. Was he one of the people who thought that, like, the Ukrainians would be freezed out, or the Europeans would be freezed out and they would drop aid? I don't know. Let's see if he elaborates.
I'd wait till the first cold snap and shut off the taps.
Right.
Well,
because
of course he's going to do that.
He's got the control over the energy.
Of course he's going to do that. He's already...
Okay, did it, and then it didn't work. And now Europe is more energy flexible than ever, as they're less dependent on Russian energy. It hurt them at the pump. It hurt their economy, that's for sure. But now, every single subsequent winter is going to be easy. Not to mention, Ukrainians got through it.
Already warned the West with his insistence that maintenance problems were necessary and the pipelines had to be shut down.
Do you think he will use a nuclear weapon?
If necessary, he'll use a tactical battlefield weapon.
Even
Why is he saying that so confidently?
if it starts World War III?
It won't. Probably.
Why? Because we wouldn't respond?
What's in it for us?
Why is he saying these things so confidently? I had this criticism recently while I was on the TJ Kirk, what is it called? Deep Fat Fried podcast. You can watch it on their channel or my channel. And I know the full episode is on their Patreon. I kept saying, like, I believe, or, well, you know, I think, and I do that with a lot of my statements, even statements I'm pretty confident in, because I never want to treat myself like I'm infallible. Like I have considered every single possible outcome. That when I analyze the situation around the Chinese possibly sending weapons to the Russians, I have analyzed every single detail, every single point, and I have all the access to the information because I don't. I'm only a single person. I am fallible, you know? And so I always try to, you know, kind of pretext my statements on stuff like that I don't know for 100% sure. With, well, I think, or I believe what's most likely. But man, he just said that confidently. That if forced to, if they're losing, they're going to use a nuke. He knows that for sure. Did he take into consideration whether this would make the Ukrainians submit? Because you couldn't just use one tactical nuke, right? You'd probably have to use a lot of tactical nukes if it was going to have any actual impact on the battlefield. A single tactical nuke is not going to change the balance of power really that significantly, if really at all. It mostly would be a humanitarian disaster. But the long-term impact when it comes to Russia, well, China's not going to be happy, one of the few countries that's still largely importing Russian energy exports and is trying to have more pipelines built between the two countries to support more energy export infrastructure to build up their relations. They're not going to be happy. Maybe this is one of the few situations where they agree to a price cap because they don't want to encourage the North Koreans to engage in reckless behavior on the Korean Peninsula. India has a very similar situation, not exactly similar with North Korea and China, but they have a similar concern when it comes to nuclear weapons when it comes to Pakistan. It's not just them. Nation states all around the world have this concern. And so this is one of the few scenarios where I think they could agree to a Russian price cap. And considering that Russian government revenues are down 50% and military spending is up 200 to 300%, and we see the ruble actively declining in value, we're seeing the Russians leaving the country already because they want to flee for work or flee because they see that the situation is not improving economically in their country. I don't know if the country could deal with that type of economic pressure of not only having the West kind of say bugger off, but then the Chinese and the Indians. That might be too much to bear. How would the oligarchs react? And also, let's say, how do we not know that this would end with either a direct American military intervention, which the Russians don't know that we wouldn't do this. He says, what's our interest in intervening if they use a nuke? I'll tell you our interest. The normalization of the use of nuclear weapons in the international space, which is not just going to affect Ukraine, it's going to affect everyone, Not to mention, we've had politicians like Lindsey Graham make the argument that if there's nuclear spillover, radiation from Ukraine into Poland, that could be considered a trigger of Article 5. I think that argument's a little bit more flimsy, right? Because we've seen like spillover from things like Chernobyl, but putting that aside for a moment, United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, France, Germany, China, India, nobody in the world wants to see the use of nuclear weapons normalized because it endangers everyone in the world. And so there would be a real incentive in the United States to do something to make clear that this will not go without a severe reaction, that the Russians will not be rewarded for this behavior with a military victory, which could mean an escalation and not only, radiological aid to Ukraine, not only humanitarian aid to Ukraine, but possibly military aid to Ukraine. ATACMS, that would almost certainly be sent. F-16s could be sent. More armored vehicles, more artillery, more guns, more everything. And this is one of the few scenarios where a direct on-the-ground intervention to either kill the people who did the attack directly or to punish the Russians in some way might actually be possible, because the president could make the decision that they need to make clear that any actions like this and again in the future will not be tolerated under any circumstances. And you want to know what? I don't think there would be too much backlash from the international community if that was to be the case. There would be fear, considering we have one nuclear power clashing with another nuclear power, but I don't know if it would come with that much outrage, considering, was the Russians that dropped the nuke. Man, did he also consider, how beneficial it would be for the Russians, or the possibility that there might, be a problem and the Russians mess up? That wouldn't be the first time. Do we know the status of the nuclear arsenal? There's so many elements that Jordan Peterson hasn't really, analyzed, or he at least doesn't bring it up that he's analyzed. And he says it just so confidently that if the Russians are put into a corner, they will use a nuke. Should not say that so confidently. He does not know that.
If you let him do it and get away with it, where does that end? Then you are into a hit analogy.
Wow. Here's Morgan and had a concrete, somewhat coherent response to Jordan Peterson. The moment. Okay, I am awake. Let's continue.
There's a lot. You can get yourself in a situation, no problem, where there's no good outcome. We're trying to do that right now on every front we can possibly imagine. We can easily get ourselves in a situation where it's hell this way and hell that way. That's highly probable.
Well, should the Ukrainians give the Russians anything? When I was over there recently interviewing President Zelensky, what I was struck by was everybody I met in Kyiv, the capital city, were utterly resolute. Don't give them an inch of our land.
Yeah, well, I can't speak to that because I don't know what the preconditions for peace might be. But I do know that naive notions that the Russians are going to lose somehow, or that we're going to win, I just don't understand. I don't understand that. Well, what do you mean we're going to win? What are we going to win here exactly?
Well, I guess a victory would be that the Russians retreated from Ukraine.
With Ukraine in ruins.
Right.
Well,
wait, that's why it's naive? Dude, is this this sounds like an Oppenheimer shit, like, is real victory, you might have won the battle, but there is a lot of death and destruction. So did you truly win? Like, yes, you won. Yes. The French won, their country was in ruins. The British won, they had a lot of bombing in their country. Yeah. The Soviets won World War II. Would we retell the events of World War II? Do we say that the Nazis won? Do we say Soviets won? Do we say that no one won? We say the Soviets won. We say the United States won. You want to know why we won? Because the Nazis don't exist on the fucking map anymore, and we burnt every single one of the Nazi effigies or symbols to the ground, destroyed it, and erased their influence on Germany completely. So yes, you can have a ton of destruction and still win a war. Most wars are destructive. If this is the argument, then no one has ever won a war.
Okay, fine, that's a hell of a victory. Like, I think Putin could manage that, because I think he could tell his people, and I think they might buy it. It's like, we accomplished our objective. We devastated Ukraine and we kept it out of the hands of the West. And that's not great. It's not what we had hoped for, but it's better than the alternative. And I
Wait, how would so Russians are out of Ukraine, but Ukraine's is like a burning heap. How does that quote unquote keep it out of the hands of the West? Wouldn't Ukraine still join NATO, still join some defensive alliance structure, still have American economic investment, Western companies, Western countries investing into the country, training their soldiers in F-16s, integrating them into NATO, integrating them into the European Union? Why would... Okay, whatever.
I think they would buy that. And I think when Putin went into Ukraine, I thought a bunch of things, which I made a YouTube video about that. People criticized like mad. I thought, okay, well, what's
Maybe because it was stupid.
happening here? Oh, I see. His end game for failure is that Ukraine is left in a smoking ruin. Oh, that's a victory. So
I'm sorry, but this is what we've gone from. Originally, the Russians wanted to engage in regime change, topple Zelensky's government, and make Ukraine subservient to Russian interests. When that failed, now they're trying to scrape away as much territory as possible. Now, if that fails as well, the mere fact that Ukraine is going to be heavily damaged means that the Russians still win. So in Jordan Peterson's world, there's no world where the Russians lose, even if they're literally pushed out of Crimea. That's not a loss for the Russians because Crimea will be damaged. Then the Soviets didn't win any wars, but at least they didn't win World War II. I mean, the French didn't win World War I because much of France was damaged. Like what? Belgium didn't win World War I. Like what? I don't know. This just seems very silly.
then he can lose with impunity.
Right.
So how can we win? We can't win against Vladimir Putin anyways, because you cannot win against someone you cannot say no to.
Saddam Hussein, Kuwait. Saddam Hussein, 2003. Yugoslavia. World War II. I mean, what is this? What is he talking about? What? Who let this man out of the home, man? What do you mean you can't win against somebody who can't say no? Okay, terrorists. We've beaten many terrorists. We've killed many terrorists, and many terrorist organizations no longer exist. Like white nationalist terror groups in the United States. Or other terror groups around the world. Rebel factions in different countries. What do you mean? That happens all the time. The only difference is that it's harder to negotiate with a person who won't take no for an answer. That doesn't mean you can't beat them. What does that mean?
Period. And we can't say no to Putin because we sold our soul for his oil and gas.
Okay, but what happened to the oil and gas? Wait, I'm sorry. This is just like maybe it's a year. It's almost like a year later. This is 9 months old. So I have the gift of hindsight that Jordan didn't have, and I do want to make that note because I want to be as fair as possible. But God, that didn't age well. Where was the European frozen winter? Energy prices, they did go up. They did. But each subsequent winter is going to be easier, and Europe is still surviving. While the Russian economy is more damaged than the European economy is, even without Russian energy exports, as the Europeans have tried to make their energy exports more flexible, importing from the United States and other sources. So they were able to water the storm, and the majority of Europeans still support aid to Ukraine, even after facing this dreadful winter.
And we did that to elevate our moral stature in relationship to saving the planet. And so here we are, facing a very dire winter, hoisted on the petard of our own foolishness and more.
Jesus Christ, he's trying so hard to sound so fucking smart. Hoisted on the petard of our own foolishness, as he says nothing of value, man.
Moral presumption. We're saving the planet. We'll see. I don't think so. It doesn't look like it to me. And this is the most catastrophic issue here. Assuming that we're facing an environmental crisis of planetary proportions, which is not something I buy, by the way, assuming we are, well, then I would imagine that you would put in place measures that would ameliorate that problem instead of exacerbating it. But all the measures you're putting in place are actually making the environmental problem worse. So how...
By fighting against the Russians, we are helping climate change. So the best thing for the planet would be to let the Russians conquer Ukraine. What is he even saying, man?
Even vaguely acceptable. And I look at that and I think, oh, I see. It's just like George Orwell said about middle-class socialists 50 years ago. It's
Dude, he's bumping around everywhere.
Not that you love the planet, it's that you hate humanity. So, well, have at her, boys and girls, and we'll see what happens this winter. And it's very terrifying to me.
And guess what happened? Fucking nothing.
It is.
Especially here, you know, because your energy prices have gone way out of control, and that's going to hurt a lot of poor people, and certainly around the world as well. The World Bank already estimates.
The reason why the Europeans were able to sustain the winter was, again, they were able to find other sources very quickly, and they made sure to store up as much energy as possible going into the winter, Germans especially, and they were able to get through it. So, God, man, age well.
That we've put 350 million people into what they call food insecurity. 350 million. That's 3 times as many as the communists managed to kill. Maybe we can manage that in a winter. But the planet has too many.
350 million dead in a winter. Did he really? I'm sorry, let me hear that again.
They call food in bank already has people. And certainly around the world as well. The World Bank already estimated that we've put 350 million people into what they call food insecurity. 350 million. That's 3 times as many as the communists managed to kill. Maybe we can manage that in a winter. But the planet has too many people on it anyway, so, you know, that's just poor people.
This all meat, like, fake diet has given his worms, and it has somehow traveled up into his started to eat at the gray matter. Keeps this man able to walk and talk. Number one, if the Russians invade Ukraine, a breadbasket of the world, and then refuse to negotiate, you know, grain initiatives with Turkey, or they pull out of it, that's their fault. They're causing the crisis. We're not causing the crisis. Okay? If that's the case, then if Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania were big, let's say, energy producers, and Russia invaded, causing an energy crisis, is us just not giving them all of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania? Like, oh, well, we're the ones causing the energy crisis. They're the ones that started the crisis. They're the ones that started it. What do you mean that we're causing the crisis and we're put all these 350 million people into food insecurity? If the Russians invade a country that's a breadbasket of the world, it's their fault. This is part of the reason why, even though, you know, this is very lib take, we need international rules. We need rules of the international community because we're so unbelievably interconnected. And if we were to reward this type of behavior, what would stop the Russians from creating another food crisis just 10 years from now when they invade Ukraine again after we reward them for their behavior, giving them Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporozhye, Kherson, and Crimea? Okay, that's enough of that. I'm done.